Welcome, welcome, everyone. And we're going to have a good time tonight, today. Maybe even tomorrow, too. Wait. Sorry.
Let me put this over here.
Okay. I don't usually drink, so sorry. Okay. Anyway, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with all of us tonight. So you will have the opportunity to talk to us. So we have been here for, this is what, a couple of days, yeah. And I don't know what to say. I mean, what these two people here have done to create this extraordinary moment where we are able to show our work not only in a gallery of art, but in one of the great cathedrals in the world, is, for me, a special gift that I will never, ever forget. And I know that Kira feels the same way. This is also a very important moment for all of us, because the world is changing right now, significantly changing. And I'm not just talking about global warming. I'm talking about the nature of who we are and what people we are and who we represent in our inner selves in the deepest way possible. And all of this now is made possible by the fact that the world is getting smaller. And so whether we like it or not, we will all, myself included, have to start to look around and see who is sitting next to you. And I mean that metaphorically. I'm talking about the whole globe. And so this is one of the most important times of change in the past 1,000 years, because the planet is changing and we are on that planet. So this gives us opportunities. We shouldn't think of it as a kind of difficulty. We don't want to think of it as a threat. I think that's a very, very important thing not to do, not to get paranoid, to get, claustrophobic and go inside. This is not the time to do that. Right now, the world, at this very moment, of course, there are beautiful flowers just outside our door here. And you can think of those flowers as the people. So they're blossoming now. And that's what's happening right now. And I think that's marvelous. It's affecting young people. It's affecting old people. It's affecting babies, children. It's a unique moment for all of us. Yeah, well, I want to start with a friend of mine, actually. There's an artist named Richard Long. He's an English artist. And Richard is a pretty extraordinary human being. What he does for his art is basically to continue to span the globe over and over and over again at various angles and devices. He's been to every single continent on this earth multiple times. And that's what he does. He walks. That's his art. And then occasionally he'll actually stop And when he stops, he might find some interesting stones on the ground, and he might make a little stone circle of some sort. Because being English, and you know, in northern England, there's a lot of stone circles from the Druids and like people like that. So he's a pretty incredible man, and I mean, I don't think I could even, I couldn't walk next to the guy because he just takes these long strides, and he can just outrun you at a moment's notice. So I was thinking one day, I didn't ask him, but I was just thinking, well, what is Richard Long actually doing out there? He's just walking in a straight line. I'm thinking, what is he trying to do? And then I began to think, what does he have in his mind when he's doing these walks? Because when he starts walking, he goes at the same pace, and sometimes it can be miles and miles and thousands of miles of walking. And so I visualized just for myself what Richard Long's brain would look like if you were looking at it from the side, this way. So I imagined him doing his walk, and then I thought of him as someone who's actually inside the head of Richard Long. And what would that look like? So we're going to show you a video now just to start the evening today. I think
this is a long piece. It's 17 minutes long. It's called Inner Passage. This piece is part of a new series that we made called the Mirage series. We have visited the deserts many times, the first time in 1979, where we recorded mirages on the Chot in Tunisia, which is a piece that is actually being shown in the museum right now. Several times we come back. This piece was recorded in a place called El Mirage. It is 2 hours drive from Los Angeles. And we decided to record this in the hottest time of the year, in July 2012. And shortly you will see possibly a very small figure coming from a long distance. It's right next to a very huge, long, 9 kilometers flat, dry lake bed, and the elevation is about 7,000 meters. So on one side, not here, when we turn the camera, we can record mirages. But here we wanted to record the Mojave Desert. So we sometimes use very long lenses when we're recording in the desert so that we can enlarge the distortion of the heat waves, which is what we did in Chad el Jarid. And that serves to create a mysterious setting for the recordings. In this arid and mostly hostile location, the immense landscape becomes the central protagonist. And the humans, as you can see, are tiny travelers in this vast environment, and they're powerless against the dryness and the heat.
And it's rare to find a human being out in these kind of environments. And that's what the native peoples have always understood. And that's one of the most important things that they do, is to do a special ceremony which brings them way out into the desert alone for 3 days. And that's a kind of a trial to see how deep they are and how strong they are and how resilient they are.
For this particular series of work, we brought out a crew of about 30 people. So, because we were shooting other works at the same time. So, you know, we had to house them and feed them. We had a little tent city. And we, of course, had to transport them every day to this site, half an hour away from the nearest town. And, of course, we had to care for their health and their safety needs. This person, who is actually our son, was most concerned about the rattlesnakes. So, but luckily, there were no rattlesnakes in the area at that time.
I was just wondering, how important is it that it is your son coming forward? Is he just an actor, or could he have been someone else?
Our son is also an artist. He probably in another place, another time, would have been a shaman. So it was actually very appropriate to use him, and he also can walk a really straight line. He's very focused, and he understands this nature, and so especially him, he would have been very aware of the creatures around, so he knew what kind of, you know, rattlesnakes there would be. But yeah, it was important to use him.
How do you direct such a piece? I mean, how do I need to understand this? Do you do it several times and then pick the best one, or do you go together and walk the way, or give you say something to the actor to do?
Well, Well, generally speaking, it's a good idea with actors is to give them limited information. And I think that is actually probably also for the rest of us as well. But I don't mean it in the negative way. I'm thinking of a positive way now. Because I do believe right now we're in a very difficult time, because there is so much information in the world, and much of it is not useful, to say the least. And a lot of it is deceiving and dangerous, actually. So just in that alone is something to worry about and really, you know, think about. But I think, you know, the world is as I said a little while ago, the world is actually opening up right now, and that gives us a lot of opportunities to engage each other in hopefully meaningful kind of ways. And I think that art is at the center of that, actually, right now, at this moment. Because all of the cultures are mixing together, and they're all showing us who they are, finally. And this is a very, very important time.
But working with actors is actually kind of interesting, because we only do that when we really need to have someone be able to repeat something over and over again in a certain way. For example, with the Passion series, and we're going to show another piece from the Passion series, you know, some of which you have in the cathedral here. We needed to shoot something very quickly, but so that they can repeat it, so that we can, in fact, do several takes. But also to have the control to be able to do what we want. And of course the Passion series is all about emotions and about how you express those, and how you maybe do an arc in one emotion and then move through that and then go into another emotion. And that's kind of a hard thing to do for most people. But actors are kind of trained to respond to things pretty quickly. The reason why we needed to do it quickly was because in the end, as you know, we slow things down. So 1 or 2 seconds becomes, you know, 10 or 15 seconds in the time that we needed. And so that's the kind of control we're talking about. And we only choose people who can do this, who are not necessarily trained in the Hollywood way, because in Los Angeles you have to be very careful because most people who are there want to be in the movies. And we go to like alternative theaters, or we go to performing arts people who have more control and who are more aware of themselves, and that's very important as well. So then Bill can just give them an impression, an idea, and then they can own it. It's very important that somebody owns something, because then they can express it in an honest way. And so, but this was just a matter of walking in a straight line. And we had just done a very big piece where 20 people were walking in a straight line, and most of them were actors, but some of them couldn't walk in a straight line. It was incredible. They even had the line marked for them. And yet they still, I mean, okay, so it was 40 degrees Celsius. So it was very hot. But nonetheless, you know, it's like you just need to put your mind to it, you know. And so it's not always an actor that can do that. It's someone who maybe studies yoga, or someone who has a very strong conscious awareness of themselves.
Well, I think also that too, just being out in the desert, and I don't know how many people here have been in a desert-like environment, but these are very special places. I think they're very emotional places. I also think that they're very spiritual places, and we know that from the ancient world. And at a certain point, our ancestors were just small tribes in this vast landscape. And whether it was in the snow, in the terms of the Eskimos, or, you know, in the plains Indians in America, and they have to deal with the climate. They have to deal with the changing of the seasons. They have to deal with all of these things, and that's again, you know, what we're all about here is humanity, keeping the human species alive, you know, and developing it and bringing it deeper and deeper and deeper as more information is gathered on the planet.
Martin wanted to say.
Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, I have a question regarding this middle part where you said, how do you call it? It's not a parallel world, but where one could say also the time stops, or just maybe the opposite, maybe it develops very fast.
Yeah.
I realize that there are many scenes, many pictures that you used already in earlier movies, in earlier videos. Is this true? Is it like recalling what you did before?
Yeah, we have a, you know, the older you get, the bigger the archive you have. You know, we kept every single thing practically. I mean, we had some obviously really terrible things that I wouldn't show anybody, you know. But generally speaking, we've kept everything, even the outtakes, all the outtakes we keep. We have a big archive. And so then that becomes a kind of source of something interesting. Even though we might have shot this piece and we didn't use a lot of the material. So it just goes in a box somewhere. We know where it is. And then in times like this, you can just you can either remember it by your own memory, but it's also cataloged very, very well in our studio. So we can just kind of throw that out. In the case of the Richard Long piece, I wanted something that was going to be kind of chaotic, because I didn't want it to be in the normal way which an archivist would do, you know, with a sequence of this and that and that. I mean, we cut it in an interesting way, but we didn't cut it perfectly, you know. That's the other thing about making any kind of creative act or creative artwork or whatever, is you don't want to actually get it too complete, because then it's locked. You know, it's a locked box, and it doesn't go anywhere. But with an audience like this, say here, you know, we could, it'd be nice one day to do this. I've always wanted to do this, but just get people here, and then just when they're at the end of the program that we're doing, we just bring a group of people who are interested in it down to the front, sit with them for a while, and see who they are and and just hear what they're feeling about what they just experienced, you know. So that's the most important thing. You have to be careful making these works so that you don't suffocate the very people who you want to acknowledge and understand and see how, you know, they are experiencing it.
Why don't we continue talking, but we're going to put on another video right now, which is normally silent anyway, and it's the Quintet of the Astonished, a work that was one of the first in the Passion series, and it was first made for an exhibition at the National Gallery in London. A curator there had decided to do a Millennium exhibition for the year 2000 and had asked many artists, mostly British, but including some international artists, to take a work as a inspiration from the National Gallery and to create another contemporary piece. And Bill found a Hieronymus Bosch piece called Christ Crowned with Thorns. It's a very striking thing, and you know Hieronymus Bosch will paint every last little detail on the emotion of people's faces. And he's an extraordinary painter, and also sort of very emotional and some horrific imagery as well, of course, because you have the crown of thorns and the people who are torturing him. And so that was his inspiration. So let's just watch that, but we will continue talking. So can we please put on Quintet of the Astonished? This is the first piece that where Bill really wanted to study the emotions in a much more deep way. And in order to do that, he wanted to slow it down as much as possible. So at that time, which was now, oh my God, 14 years ago, of course video couldn't do that. So we had to shoot in 35mm film. In Hollywood, there were at that time 4 identical cameras, only 4, that were specially built to shoot 300 frames a second. Now, normal film is 24 frames, but when you add up all of those seconds, all of those frames, 300 of them, you can slow something down like this as much as that. And so in video, you would see it step by step by step by step, but this is very extremely smooth, and you can't tell the transitions. So in actual fact, this was recorded probably in about 1 minute, the whole recording. 1,000 feet of film goes through the camera in that amount of time, and that's all you have, 1,000 feet of film. And then in post-production, you end up with this extreme slow motion. So you can see the emotions developing very slowly.
May I ask you something?
Yeah, sure.
How many times did you film this? Is it once, one film, or did you try it several times?
Well, usually in this line of work, you need to do multiple takes because you don't know how they're going to turn out. I forget how many takes it took to get this shot.
We would have done 5 or 6 takes for this.
Probably something like that.
But you can't tell the result until you play back the slow motion, and which one is going to be the best one or the most interesting.
Well, I was kind of thinking of the whole piece as a kind of as a wave, you know. It starts out normal. Looks like these people are waiting to have their picture taken, you know, together. And then gradually what happens is they all start separating. So what we did to make this work, actually, we separated the 5 actors individually and sat down with them and talked with them for a good amount of time, an hour, sometimes 2 hours, just talking about who they are, you know, what they're doing, trying not to talk about what we're actually about to make, but anything but. So we can kind of get to know these people really intimately, because we're asking them to do something really, really difficult. So that was the first thing, to kind of get this idea first. And then we chose, out of the 5, the best people. And then that became really interesting. And that is to assign characters to these people, you know, right after we met them. And so we worked really hard on that. We really looked, and that's why we looked at we had talked with them for a while, and really, and this was over several days. It wasn't just like in the studio for half an hour. So then we got that together, and so you're seeing joy, anger, sorrow, and fear. And then this man here in the blue is a kind of a wild card. You know, we just put him in. I kind of thought of him as maybe the kind of person you see walking down the street, you know, rummaging through the garbage or something. It's just, you know, they're not all there. And we just let it go. You just see the emotions come up, you know, and to see it, it's like a ballet. It's like a ballet of emotion, and that's what human beings do. We've all had these emotional feelings. We've been with them many, many times. And we don't seem to even really recognize them somehow. But it's just kind of amazing. And then if you look at the Renaissance and stuff, when they really got interested in movement and things, then, you know, this looks like a Renaissance painting here. And I wasn't making a Renaissance painting. I was just trying to figure out the emotions, what they looked like.
As far as I understand, it is very important to be aware of death your whole life, because then that governs the way that you live in preparation for your death. Right. So the awareness of death, it's not so much a morbid fixation on anything like that, but it's a reality that we all have to face, obviously. And if we can be more aware of it, right, the better it is for us, I think.
I mean, it sounds silly, you know, but I think probably a number of you probably know that I had a near drowning experience when I was a young boy, and that changed my whole existence. I was only 6 years old at the time, and luckily I was saved by a relative under the water. But then at that point, after that, I was never afraid of it at all. I felt, you know, the near drowning experience, which most people would be horrified and say, "Oh, thank God you're alive," you know. But for me, I thought I was going into the next, I was only 6 years old, so I imagined myself, I just thought, oh, okay. I remember I just sat down on the bottom and I just said, oh, well, this must be the next thing that we do. And I just sat down very happily. I saw fish and color. It was just so beautiful. And luckily, you know, my uncle was there to pull me out because I wouldn't be here. Because it was just a massive amount of beauty coming at me and mystery at the same time. So I think that's, the Tibetans have the right idea, you know. They really do. They really have a right idea about death. And I know, no, we don't like to talk about it, and I completely understand that. But it's part of human existence. You know, there are 3 reservoirs of humanity. You know, there are 3 parts of human beings in this situation. Hello. I'll be right there. A little too soon. I like to think of humanity as in 3 parts. One is the unborn. These are all the human beings that have not yet arrived with us here. And on the far side of that are the dead. The ones who have already been here, but now they're on the other side. And so that leaves two infinite reservoirs, infinite pools of humanity that will constantly be always moving. We are the only ones that have a kind of timeline, a kind of an Aristotelian kind of time sequence. So we enter stage left, I like to say, which is us walking onto the planet, coming through the parents' bodies, and then growing up, changing, understanding things, seeing who we are, and hopefully changing things for the better when you age and grow up. But eventually there's time, the time has to come where you have to go off to the other side. So enter stage left, exit stage right. And that's the moving image. That's everything who we are. And I think that kind of sequence is actually quite a profound thing. And that's why, as I've said many times before, you know, it's very important to leave something behind. You must leave something behind. That's the only way they'll know that you were here, you know, really. And that will be passed on also with the families and so on and so forth. It's quite a miraculous and very interesting thing, this kind of river of life. A lot of people have called it a river of life. And it's a very profound thing, because it's the only thing the one that's just moving. You know, it's moving, it's going somewhere.
But I just want to add to that also is that the work is very cyclical. It works in cycles. So when you think that something is finished, it starts again. And so that's kind of, there's always a positivism in the work, I feel, most of it. Although I must say, some of it may not be the case. But the study of the emotions is interesting. We'll talk about the transfigurations later, because that's also a coming and a going constantly. So there's always a kind of a rebirth, and not just a transfiguration or a transformation, but then it goes again. There's a piece that we will show, just a documentation of. It's a work that we did last year. It's very recent. Again, it's about water, shot in water, and it's a piece called The Dreamers. And in a room, you are surrounded by 7 vertical panels. You'll see the documentation in this. And each one of them has a person sleeping underwater, basically. The documentation is only 1.5 minutes, so we're going to show it 2 times, just for you to have an idea, and then we can have a conversation about that as well. And this has sound, so we're going to stop talking, and we will listen to the piece, basically. So here's The Dreamers.
Okay, so that's The Dreamers. And that's one of our most recent works. And obviously it involves water. I can't even, I shouldn't even say that. I should just say water.
Why don't I just read something that we wrote for the catalogue for the exhibition last year, and it kind of gives a good little summary. As you know, we've been working with water a lot, the whole entire creative life here. But this is what we wrote. And this is a series of water portraits that we made. Water Portrait Series is a continuation of a lifelong exploration of the element of water, the substance that is life itself. Water represents change, the passage of time, it's ever-flowing, eternity, and is a metaphor for the unborn, for birth and rebirth, baptism and reflection. Water is a powerful force that can never be contained. The water portraits are unsettling. Water is not a natural environment for humans. But yet here are dreamers who seem to be content in this watery world that gently rocks them, dreamers who mysteriously seem to exist without the aid of breath. So in actual fact, when you stand in this room after a while, you realize that they will never open their eyes and they will never take a breath. So that I find it myself rather unsettling because I'm waiting for something to happen, but it doesn't. So in a way, this represents that transition period in our lives, or after our lives, or before our lives, however you want to interpret it. But it's an interesting departure, I think, from the rest of the pieces.
Yes, and I think for me it was kind of it was quite an odd experience because we had just finished the work just in time to take it to our exhibition in the Grand Palais, and I watched, watching people come in to see it. It is, as Kira said, unsettling because you're not sure if these people, you don't really know where they are. You don't know. They've been actually. We ended this exhibition with that, and it was really profound. There were people who were very upset for not realizing, not seeing that these people could finally get out of the water. So it was a very strange experience. I felt for the first time in my life that this was an incomplete piece, We talked about it a lot, and I still couldn't get that out of my mind, that it was something that was there, but it wasn't really finished. And I'd like to believe that that's myself telling myself that this might be a good thing to look at again and go into even a little deeper and see what even is beyond that. Because what we did, actually, generally speaking, is, all of these people were shot on the ground, because obviously we're not going to put water up on the wall. So the people are all shot from a camera that's looking straight down on them. They are lying flat on their back in a large plexiglass tank. So they're lying on their backs, looking straight up, and we are adjusting how they're moving, by holding their legs just outside a frame, so that they can keep this nice, beautiful water movements in their work. And then underneath that, what we did was, under the plexiglass see-through tank, what we did underneath that was we created a seascape, yeah, basically. Yeah, it was kind of like a river, an underwater river, but it was the bottom of the lake. So it was just a series of stones and little, small little, pebbles and things like that. So it looked just like a bottom of a lake. And then, in the end, all we really had to do was go 90 degrees and bring the people in the image. Once we were finished with them, we then took the shot and we just put it up on the wall. So, which is odd too, because the water doesn't go that way. You know, that's not what water does. So it was a very interesting. I found it disturbing at times, but a very interesting kind of experience.
I think Martin, you saw the piece, right? Do you have? Oh, I'm sorry. There's a.
Yeah. To go back to the just shortly to go back to the show in Paris in the Grand Palais. You start with a reflecting pool there, and you end with this wonderful dreamer presentation. And the reflecting pool, as you might know, is shown here in the Kunstmuseum. So you will have this circle, you know, the beginning of the Grand Palais exhibition and the end. But what I wanted to ask you, today when I saw Bill, I asked him if he slept well, and he said yes, and then I said, "Did you have a nice dream?" He said, "No, I never dream." And I am wondering why you are interested in dreams when you never dream.
We have to call up Mr. Freud, I think, immediately. I think, I can't be sure, but from a life of working, of looking, feeling, touching, creating images, I think I don't have any dreams left, because my dreams are what you see in my work. And so the dreams that I have are dreams in this world, kind of, in a way. And my dreams, I never, rarely dream. It's highly unusual if I ever dream, and I think that's because of, again, just working with this medium, which is itself a kind of dream machine. That's what they call Hollywood, for example, the dream machine. So that's just, you know, what happened, and my dreams became atrophied, I think.
Sorry?
The dreams became atrophied.
Oh, I see.
You know, my particular dreams, my specific dreams, they atrophied, and then they just became a part of my life as an artist, you know.
We have a question over here. Could we use the microphone though, so people in the back can hear as well? Thank you.
It's just a short question. I was wondering about the sound in this specific work. It sounds very perfect. I don't think it's documentary, is it? It's not the original sound.
No.
It is the original sound in this work.
It is.
Yeah.
It's for this one?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. The water, the sound that you hear is actually the water inside the space. So yes, there is.
Actually, that's true.
It's not a silent piece, but the water doesn't come from every channel. There are 7 channels, but there are 4 speakers in the whole space.
Right.
So in fact, as a viewer, you do feel like you're actually a little bit underwater as well, because you're surrounded by these people, and you also are surrounded by the sound. Anybody else have a question at this point? Yes, over here.
My question is regarding your relationship with the world of cinema, foreign pictures, and what are your favorite filmmakers? I know that you appreciate especially Andrei Tarkovsky movies.
Yeah.
So can you talk about it?
Well, that's kind of a hard question for me. I actually don't really pay a lot of attention, certainly to Hollywood movies. I mean, I respect them. I have friends that make them.
And you watch them.
And I do watch them sometimes, yeah. And sometimes I must say, and just maybe because I grew up seeing these movies, you know, I just feel occasionally what I will actually do, I'm going to say something now that you might be disturbed by, those of you who know my work and stuff, but every once in a while, I will actually, in the middle of the afternoon, when I'm not feeling well, or I go to the movies alone and watch the most stupidest movies possible. No, they're not silly. They're not silly. But basically, they're they're movies that I would maybe watch, occasionally. But I'm not. It's not serious about it. It's just something to take my mind off of what I do all the time, which is this moving image, the idea of the moving image. And I do love Tarkovsky, and I love a lot of the artists that do this work. But generally speaking, I don't spend a lot of time going to the movies. My work is too, it's stuck to me. It's stuck to me. It just keeps in there. And I always take a little pad with me, and I can be anywhere, and I'll write down a thought. I have these thoughts that just pop into my brain, just, without knowing, it could happen at any time. So I just keep all of that together, I get little fragments of things too. I'll go and I'll start to work on a piece, and then, hello, oh hi Bill, you're here. I might be working on a work at that moment, and then I'll get up and I'll make myself a cup of tea. I have a little study, a fairly small place that I make most of my work from. And then I'll go out there, and I'm on the way to the kitchen. I'll get an idea, but it's incomplete. It's a fragment. So I just quickly write it down, put it somewhere, and then I have a whole little place where these things are floating out there. So I don't know.
I think more influences actually come from studying paintings. We had a wonderful many experiences with Giotto, for example, or with Pontormo, or kind of Renaissance painters or pre-Renaissance paintings, ancient art. So that's where more, and poetry and writing, right. Reading. Bill does a lot of reading. So
that's correct.
Maybe a few ideas may have come originally from movies, techniques and things like that, but not content-wise, certainly.
Thank you.
We should keep moving, I think, here, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's next here?
We want to show you one piece in the end, which we'll see almost completely, but and it's from the Transfiguration series. There is a work in the cathedral called Three Women, and this is a similar work. So it's part of this series that was inspired by a Senegalese poet that Bill found. He found this beautiful poem, and you can read it maybe.
Sure,
it
yeah.
might be nice.
Yeah.
Again, on the topic of death.
Yeah. He's a Senegalese poet and storyteller, and his name is Barago Diop. He passed away not that long ago. And he just wrote this poem that completely stopped me in my tracks and gave me a very deep, deep feeling of what the real idea about death is. And there's another one of my heroes who I am very close to. He's an Islamic mystic by the name of Ibn al-Arabi. And he was an extraordinary Islamic mystic because he believed that all religions were one. And this was in the Middle Ages. This guy figured this out. And I was really impressed with that. So I'm going to start with a poem by Ibn al-Arabi, and then I'll go over to Barago Diop. So here's what Ibn Arabi is telling us. He's saying about humanity: the self is an ocean without a shore. gazing upon it, it has no beginning or end in this world and the next. That means that humanity is coming in, spending some time, and flowing out. Constantly, constantly, constantly. And this here is Virago Diop's poem. It's one of my very favorite poems in the world. Hearing things more than beings, listening to the voice of fire, the voice of water, hearing the wind in the weeping bushes, the sighs of our forefathers. The dead are never gone. They are in the shadows. The dead are not in earth. They're in the rustling tree, the groaning wood, the water that runs, the water that sleeps. They're in the hut. They are in the crowd. The dead are not dead. The dead are never gone. They're in the breast of a woman. They're in the crying of a child, in the flaming torch. The dead are not in the earth. They're in the dying fire, the weeping grasses, the whimpering rocks. They're in the forest. They are in the house. The dead are not dead.
So maybe we can show a work called Visitation, and this piece has sound.
You said that you don't aim for perfection, if I understand this right. But this surprises me a lot, because for me your work looks so perfectly composed and arranged, and I have the impression, yes, well, everything in the videos, it's very well reflected and composed, and the colors, and what the people do and how they touch and what they don't do. So this surprises me. I thought also because of the slowing down, how I say, if you look at the video, it's all very much slowed down.
Yes,
so
right.
I would think when you make the film, the video, you try to make it very, very perfect, and if you show it very, very slow, there is a lot of accident or things which happen by chance. So there is a lot of things not so perfect. But I had supposed that you try to be very perfect by doing it.
Well, oh, sorry. Yeah, perfection is a dream, and it's something that we all strive for, of course. I admit, when I make my work, that I am trying to make it perfect in a kind of way that suits myself, my abilities, and so that's true. I totally understand that. But because of how we're existing right now on this planet, we're actually overpassing the idea of perfection. You know what I mean? Yes. It's like hyper-perfection. And that's why I mentioned, I forget where and when, at this moment, I said this, but it was really about, if you go too far, it actually inverts itself and starts coming back on you in a negative kind of way. And it's happened to me, and a lot of artists experience that, and a lot of us experience that in various different ways. You can't actually go too much, you know, into one thing, you know. You can't, you know, take a candy bar and keep eating it because you'll die. It'll kill you eventually, you know. So some of the things we do and we create and we make can actually harm us, you know. And sometimes, in another kind of way, sometimes those exact same things you'll make something and you'll think, oh, that's not very good. So you'll just put it over there and you put it somewhere and you'll forget about it. And then, you know, years later, you'll be looking through your things at home and then you'll find this thing that you were trying to work on. And there it is. It's right there for you. The thing that's incomplete is right there for you.
I think technically we always try to be perfect because we don't want the technical side of things to get in the way. If you're uncomfortable with a cable that's peeking out from the back or something, people understand that, they notice it, and then it's unbalanced and you feel strange. We just did the Tristan opera again in the Paris Opera in the Bastille, and we just came from there. And I sat in the theater for the dress rehearsal. I thought, why am I feeling so comfortable? Because we have actually done this in other theaters and in concert halls as well as opera houses. And then I remembered that for months we had the model of the Paris Opera in our studio, and we designed the screens to fit exactly to the stage. And so finally we came home, basically. So I felt very, very comfortable. It was a very unconscious feeling. But also in terms of the perfection thing, we don't give any answers. We only ask questions. So there's no perfection in the end. It's what you feel is the right answer.
Yeah, the question is always more important than the answer. It really is. And it will always be that way. You know, if you went up to Delphi in the ancient world and you sat there after a long journey and you sat there in the dark room with the priestess shaman, a woman, of course, and you're trying to understand something. You have something to tell her, and she'll talk around it in some ways, but she will never complete it. You know, you'll never get the answer. The answer will not come. And that's, I think, a very powerful thing, and then we should all pay attention to that, you know.
I just wanted to comment. You have been referring to the Italian Renaissance, and I think I can see this very clearly, particularly to masters of the 15th century, Piero da Francesca or Giovanni Bellini. This is very, very obvious. So the term for these painters, what they were doing is pathos. It's not emotion, pathos. And I think that would be the much better, proper expression for what you're doing, because pathos is a contradiction between stillness on the one hand and a very strong emotion, really, a strong movement on the other, but which can't move.
Yes.
So this inner life of these paintings, I think this is exactly this is what you're really taking and developing.
Okay. Well, I like you very much. I thank you. No, seriously.
That's a really nice comment.
That's a really, really great comment, and I really appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. And so now I'll have this new idea for myself. So I really appreciate that very much. Thank you. And again, human beings, right? Collective energy, you know? It's a special thing that we have. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well,
It
thank
was
you.
wonderful to be with you this afternoon.
We really enjoyed being with you, and we just want to say thank you very, very much for coming. So thank you.